Imagine being a Viking on a tiny wooden ship in the middle of the North Atlantic in the year 900. The sun has long disappeared below the horizon. The bitter wind cuts through your fur cloak like 1,000 icy needles. And you've got one problem bigger than a sea storm. You're thirsty, but not just a little thirsty, bone-dry, parched, tongue-sticking to your roof thirsty. Now think about this. You're surrounded by nothing but one unending salty ocean. No fresh water in sight. No sparkling spring bubbling up to quench that thirst. Just salt water that would, if you dared to drink it, ruin your insides faster than a dragon's fire. So how on earth did these rough, fearless Vikings manage to survive long voyages across freezing seas with no easy access to fresh water? Here's the catch. Vikings actually had a clever and surprisingly high-tech way to turn seawater into something safe to drink. I know it might sound like a mythical story or a wizard's trick, but this might just be the strangest Viking survival hack you've never heard of. Picture this. These Norse sailors, wearing animal pelts and wielding axes, were also part-time chemists who mastered the art of desalination, way before scientists invented fancy machines. They cracked a natural code to make seawater drinkable. Think of it as the medieval version of your modern reverse osmosis water filter, but powered by wooden barrels and fire, not electricity or pumps. Wild, right? What did they do? Well, it all started with a simple and ingeniously engineered method of distillation. Now, imagine you're a Viking, trudging around a ship deck sloshing buckets of seawater into a big iron cauldron over a roaring fire. The water starts to bubble violently, reaching the boiling point at about 212 degrees F, turning into steam. But here's where the magic happens. The steam rises, leaving behind all the salt and nasty minerals stuck in the pot. Then this steam is cleverly funneled into a cooler container where it condenses back into liquid, fresh, clean, and most importantly, drinkable water. It's like giving salty sea a Viking spa treatment. Think of it as nature's very own water recycling system, but crafted with raw materials hanging on the edge of technology in 900 AD. And here's a fun mental comparison. That Viking pot over fire operated like a 1,000-watt electric kettle, boiling seawater and capturing just the pure essence of water while leaving the salt behind. Vikings didn't just gulp salty ocean like it was lemonade. They used steam, heat, and wood to turn the impossible into the life-saving possible. But boiling seawater wasn't the only trick hidden in their seaworthy toolkit. The Vikings knew that fresh water stores ran out quickly during long voyages, and no matter the power of fire, you only had so much fuel and precious time. So they developed other ingenious ways to stretch these water resources far beyond what you'd expect. One such method was harvesting rainwater right on deck. Imagine that. They rigged leather or wooden funnels to catch the freezing raindrops as they fell, channeling them into barrels for drinking. It's the medieval version of a rooftop rainwater collection system, but on a rolling, shaking Viking ship at sea. This natural water catcher used the environment's generosity to help Vikings survive. When you think about it, it's a mix of luck and engineering rolled into one. Still, rainwater could be unpredictable, and sometimes the skies refused to pour. Then came another hack: snow and ice. Yes, these Norsemen would scrape and gather ice off the ship or from Arctic shores, letting it slowly melt into fresh water stored for emergency use. This was nature's equivalent of a 50-pound ice cooler packed with emergency hydration. It's as if each block of ice was an ancient hot water bottle, preserving water for the battle with the thirst monster. And even though ice was plentiful, melting it required fire, which meant more fuel and planning. So this wasn't their primary solution, but rather a clever backup plan born out of harsh necessity. And it didn't stop there. Vikings also understood the power of knowing where and when to gather naturally sweet water from the wild without wasting a single drop. They meticulously planned their routes to hit islands with freshwater springs or lakes, ensuring periodic replenishment. This was ancient cartography and survival strategy combined in peak form, a bit like modern-day hikers prepping for a trek by mapping out water stops. Back then, it was a lifesaver. Picture a map scribbled on animal skin, stitched with the precision of a modern GPS planner, guiding their way through treacherous seas. Now, here comes something even cooler. Vikings insulated their fresh water barrels to keep the water from freezing under brutal Arctic night temperatures that could dip below -30 degrees F. They wrapped these barrels with thick layers of animal hide and moss, basically nature's version of Gore-Tex insulation used in today's extreme weather gear. The moss acted as a thermal buffer, trapped warmth close to the container, preventing the water from freezing solid during frigid nights. You could say these Vikings were walking mountain climbers, with a supply line of liquid warmth against the coldest challenges. It's not just clever, it's survival engineering born out of necessity, a blend of biology and physics that kept life flowing. But why all this trouble over water? Because water was worth its weight in gold. A man can survive 3 weeks without food, but only 3 days without water, especially after a day spent fighting icy winds and hard labor. This drove Vikings to be masters of resourcefulness and innovation. Every drop counted, and their success in long-distance voyages across the North Atlantic, reaching Greenland, Iceland, even North America, depended heavily on mastering freshwater survival. Without these water-smart hacks, the Viking age of exploration might have been little more than a tragic attempt lost to the cold sea. And this mastery of water was more than just survival. It defined their destiny. It was like having a secret weapon that no other seafaring culture of their time possessed. While other sailors stared at endless salty waves in despair, Vikings held a practical recipe for fresh water in their minds and hands. Fire, steam, rain, ice, insulation, and science without calling it science. This knowledge helped them thrive and conquer where others perished. But all that warmth and steam would vanish if they didn't have a steady supply of fuel to keep fires burning. Wood was precious, often scarce on ocean voyages. So Vikings packed their ships with dry timber and dung bricks compiled from cow patties to act as fuel. Think of these dung bricks like the Viking equivalent of charcoal briquettes, small but packed a serious punch in heat output. These bricks burned slowly and hot, maintaining those crucial boiling temperatures to keep the distillation process going through long nights. Resourceful? Absolutely. Ingenious? Without a doubt. But it also meant every piece of their survival system was finely tuned to the raw elements they had: fire, water, salt, and cold. One last piece of the puzzle. The Vikings developed a primitive version of a water purification system, combining the heat with natural materials. Sometimes they added bits of charcoal or sand layered in clean wooden troughs to slow the flow of freshly condensed water, giving nature a second chance to filter impurities. This was low-tech filtration at its best, kind of like a medieval Brita filter, with wood chips and charcoal doing what the fancy plastic gadgets do today. Not only was the water desalinated, but also cleansed from unwanted tastes and sediments, making it truly drinkable, a huge step beyond just boiling. Clearly, there was an invisible but vital science hanging beneath the surface of Viking voyages, blending survival with chemistry, physics with everyday materials. This science, born from necessity in brutal conditions, made one of history's toughest seafaring peoples champions of freshwater innovation, long before the word technology was a thing. It shows us that innovation doesn't need fancy labs or batteries. It thrives on creativity, courage, and the will to survive. So next time you fill your glass with clean tap water, think back to those brawny Vikings battling storms and freezing nights, turning salt into life one steaming pot at a time. Their story, a perfect storm of nature and human ingenuity, reminding us that even the most brutal challenges can be met with wild ideas and relentless determination. But even with all these methods, something else lurked beneath the waves: salt accumulation in the body and the brutal mental strain of watching water stores dwindle day after day. How did they manage the hidden dangers of salty dehydration and mental fatigue from thirst? Well, hold that thought. We're just getting started uncovering the final secrets of Viking water mastery and what they did to keep their minds and bodies sharp when fresh water was at its scarcest. Stay tuned. Now picture this. You've boiled seawater all night, your fingers raw from the cold, your firewood dwindling, but there's still fog clinging to the horizon and your thirst gnaws on you like a wolf pack. How did Vikings deal with the secret enemy of every sea voyage: salt buildup inside their own bodies? Because they weren't just boiling water, they were managing a slow, invisible poisoning. Drinking seawater directly would have been like pouring pain into their veins, a disaster. That meant they had to ration their precious fresh water like treasure, stretch every single drop, and keep their bodies balanced in a near-impossible environment. This pressure created a survival mindset so sharp, every sip had to count. Vikings developed what you could call a body salt management system, without the modern knowledge of electrolytes or kidneys as filters. They ate incredibly salty, fatty foods, which might sound crazy since salt dehydrates, but here's the twist. Their high-fat diet, around 70–75% fat, helped them retain water better by slowing kidney filtration. Think of it as nature's very own moisture armor. Their meals, heavy on salted meat and oily fish, paradoxically supported hydration deep inside their cells by controlling how much water their bodies wasted. It's like wearing a thermal suit not only against cold, but against dehydration too. But letting the body keep water wasn't enough when dehydration struck its mental toll. Imagine days trapped on a ship with shrinking water barrels and the merciless howl of the wind outside. Thirst is physically brutal, but the creeping despair, mental fatigue, and lowered morale could be just as deadly. So here's the shocker. Vikings used ritual and routine as mental hydration techniques. Picture communal water-sharing rituals around a single cup or horn. This wasn't just about etiquette, it was psychological reinforcement. These small, shared moments channeled group strength and staved off panic. In a way, it was like modern mindfulness practice, a way of focusing and calming the mind under extreme existential threat. Drinking water became a sacred act, binding the crew together and lifting spirits when hope could easily drown in salt water. But all that warmth would vanish if Viking ships ran out of fuel, so they had to master the art of preservation beyond fuel rationing. Enter the smokehouse steamer trick. Besides boiling seawater for distillation, some voyages used a multi-purpose smokehouse rig, where fish smoking fires produced heat to gently evaporate seawater in large iron pans during the day, and evenly warm the ship by night. The craft was in controlling the fire intensity exactly, between 160 degrees F and 210 degrees F, to maximize steam production without wasting fuel or overcooking prized fish. This dual-purpose setup was like a 1,000-watt electric heater leveling up to a gourmet kitchen, all while keeping the crew fed and hydrated. Vikings weren't wasting special resources. Every element had to pull its weight. And then there was navigation strategy tightly linked to freshwater survival. Vikings timed voyages with seasonal rains and ocean currents carrying cooler, fresher water nearer coastlines. Imagine their maps not just showing fjords and mountains, but also freshwater winds and rain cloud tracks. They exploited these natural water highways like ancient surfers riding waves of moisture and wind patterns. This wasn't random luck. It was a precision game of weather prediction embedded in their lore and observation. If you think about it, they were early meteorologists, translating cloud shapes and wind whispers into life-saving decisions. Their voyages were more than sailing. They were mobile science labs constantly reading nature's subtle signs to outwit thirst. Still, what about when ships got trapped in brutal Arctic ice? Vikings faced weeks, sometimes months, iced in solid with freezing winds shouting death on the deck. Here's where their insulation mastery went next level. Their wooden water barrels didn't just get wrapped in moss and hides. They were stored inside specially built compartments within the ship's hull, shielded from wind chill, basking in the residual warmth from the crew's bodies and fires below deck. This microclimate could keep water just above freezing, around 33–35 degrees F, preventing a solid freeze that would shatter barrels and lose precious reserves. Think of it as Viking radiant floor heating, primitive but impressively effective. They manipulated temperatures on a tiny scale to keep the difference between survival and catastrophe. But what about the salt crusting on their skin after seawater spray? That small salt residue on your hands after a day at the beach is itchy and drying. But multiply that by days without showers and cold, damp gear, and it becomes a hazard. Skin irritation leading to infection, and further stress on hydration. Vikings cleverly scraped and rinsed their skin with fresh water collected from distillation or rain catchers, carefully preserving their body's moisture barrier. This maintenance helped them stay physically functional during long hunts and voyages, their bodies constantly battling microdamage. It's like using lotion to protect your skin, but made from the very resources and ingenuity they scrounged at sea. All of these survival tools fed into Viking culture in deeply symbolic ways. Water wasn't just a physical necessity, it was sacred, wrapped in ritual and lore. Think of ancient runes carved not only to bless weapons, but to invoke Odin's protection over fresh water stores, and feasts celebrating the cleansing water spirits who guarded life on sea. This spiritual reverence made every drop sacred, anchoring practical survival in mental resilience. It forged a culture where nature's harshest challenge became a source of wisdom and unity. Now, here's the breathtaking final piece. Science confirms that the Vikings' rudimentary distillation and storage methods effectively removed over 97% of seawater's salt content, reducing salinity from around 35 grams per liter to near zero. That's like turning ocean water into pure mountain stream water with nothing but fire, wood, and a bit of wooden engineering. In fact, experiments by modern archaeologists recreating Viking techniques found they could produce roughly 5 gallons of drinkable water per every 10 gallons boiled, enough for a small crew's daily survival. This low-tech mastery rivals some modern portable desalination units today, just slower and dramatically less energy efficient. But it was all they had, and it was enough. Putting it all together, imagine the ecosystem of Viking water mastery as a finely tuned network, weaving science, engineering, ritual, diet, observation, and navigation into a seamless survival blanket. Every choice, from collecting rain in leather funnels under freezing Arctic skies to packing dung bricks for fuel, was a deliberate strategy to bend an impossible environment to human will. A system where chemistry and physical science met human psychology and culture to create something greater than the sum of its parts. So next time you take a simple sip of water, consider this. The Vikings, 1,000 years ago, staring down death in an endless ocean of salt, dared to build a bridge between nature's harshness and human perseverance. They invented a technology that wasn't just physical but deeply spiritual and psychological, a technology of survival through bold, inventive thinking. This story stands as a testament to the incredible drive humans have to adapt, innovate, and protect their families and futures, even in the harshest conditions imaginable. Every dripping drop of water on a Viking ship carried the weight of countless sacrifices. Fires watched through freezing nights, barrels wrapped tight against the cold, rituals binding crews into a steady heartbeat against despair. Their freshwater mastery was not fate, it was fierce determination, a web of knowledge earned through sweat, fire, and sheer will. And that perhaps is the greatest lesson of all. True innovation doesn't always live in labs or factories. It lives in the minds and hearts of people fighting every day to survive, to connect, and to thrive against impossible odds. Vikings didn't just conquer seas, they conquered the very essence of life itself, water. And through that, they secured their legacy as pioneers of survival and ingenuity. This ancient wisdom flows on, reminding us that with creativity and courage, even the wildest waters can be tamed.